The lunch rush had just ended, and the hum of conversations in the small roadside diner faded into a comfortable silence. Sunlight poured through the large glass windows, dust specks drifting like tiny stars in the golden glow. It should have been an ordinary afternoon, but for a woman named Hannah Walker, a hard-working single mother with tired eyes and a hopeful smile, this was the day her life would change forever. She didn't know it yet, but the choice she made in the next few minutes would cost her everything and then return to her more than she had ever dreamed possible. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. The diner wasn't anything special. The floors were scuffed from years of footsteps, the red leather booths patched with tape, the coffee strong enough to wake even the sleepiest trucker. But for Hannah, it wasn't just a diner. It was survival. After her husband walked out years ago, she had worked every shift she could get, balancing long hours at the diner with raising her 10-year-old son, Jacob. Every tip meant food on the table. Every paycheck meant keeping the lights on. That day, the bell above the door jingled, and in walked a group that instantly drew every eye in the room. The Hell's Angels. Their leather jackets carried stories, their boots thudded against the floor, tattoos marking battles fought and roads conquered. The air shifted, conversations died, customers stared or quickly looked away. Behind the counter, the manager, Mr. Reynolds, stiffened. A man muttered, "Don't serve them." Another slapped down change and left in a hurry. Hannah's chest tightened. She had heard rumors about the notorious bikers, but as she looked closer, she saw something else, something different from the whispers of trouble. They weren't sneering. They weren't causing problems. They looked tired, dusty from the road, and hungry. One even slid a chair gently so an older man could sit comfortably. While the staff froze in place, Hannah tied her apron tighter, grabbed her notepad, and walked toward them. Her hands trembled, but her voice was steady. "What can I get you today?" To her surprise, they smiled, said please and thank you, cracked small jokes, and even complimented the pie in the display case. She served them with warmth, refilling coffees before they asked, slipping extra bread onto the table without charge. In her eyes, they weren't dangerous. They were just people in need of a hot meal. But as she returned to the counter, Mr. Reynolds pulled her aside, his face red with fury. "What do you think you're doing?" he hissed. "Do you know who they are? You'll drive the customers away. This diner has a reputation to protect." Hannah tried to explain that they were polite, that they deserved kindness like anyone else. But Reynolds wouldn't listen. By the time the bikers left, after placing a generous tip on the table, her fate was sealed. That night, after the chairs were flipped and the lights dimmed, Reynolds shoved an envelope into her hands. "You're finished here," he said flatly. "I can't keep someone who disobeys orders." Hannah froze, the words cutting deep. Fired. Fired for doing the right thing. She walked home heavy-hearted, her mind circling the same question with every step. Had kindness just cost her everything? The next morning, Hannah Walker woke with swollen eyes, her head heavy from a night of restless turning. She forced a smile for her 10-year-old son, Jacob, who shuffled sleepily into the kitchen in his worn pajamas. The cupboards were nearly empty, just a half box of cereal and a few slices of bread. Hannah poured the last of the milk, making light conversation so Jacob wouldn't sense the fear gnawing inside her. She told him things would get better soon, that everything was under control. But as she tied his shoelaces and sent him off to school, her own heart whispered the truth. She had no idea how they would survive. Fired for showing dignity to strangers, fired for doing the right thing. The weight of it pressed down until even breathing felt like an effort. By midday, the sound of engines shattered the quiet. The low, steady growl of motorcycles echoed down her street, growing louder with each passing second. Curtains shifted. Neighbors peeked nervously from behind blinds, whispers already spreading like wildfire. Hannah stood on her porch, her palms damp, her pulse racing. Then she saw them. The same group of bikers she had served just a day earlier pulled up, their jackets catching the sunlight, their presence commanding attention. Hannah braced herself, not knowing whether to expect trouble or thanks. But as the men dismounted, the sight before her left her speechless. Instead of anger, they carried groceries, fresh flowers, and even a box filled with notebooks, pencils, and supplies for Jacob's school. One of them, a broad-shouldered man known to his brothers as Hawk, stepped forward. He placed the items gently at her feet and looked her in the eye. His voice was firm, steady, but laced with sincerity. Kindness should never cost you everything. Hannah Walker stood frozen on her porch as Hawk pressed an envelope into her hands. Her fingers trembled as she pulled it open, and inside was more money than she could ever have imagined, more than months of wages at the diner. Her knees nearly buckled as tears welled in her eyes. She whispered through the emotion choking her throat. "Why would you do this?" Hawk's gaze held steady, his words firm and unwavering. "Because yesterday you gave us respect when no one else would. You saw us as people." His voice carried not just gratitude, but a truth Hannah had long forgotten. That kindness was never weakness, and dignity could spark something far greater than fear. Behind him, the bikers began unloading bags of fresh vegetables, pantry staples, and even small treats meant for her son Jacob, snacks he hadn't tasted in weeks. The sight left Hannah speechless. Neighbors who had once judged from their windows now whispered among themselves, astonished by the scene unfolding before them. Within hours, word traveled beyond the block. The story of a waitress fired for serving bikers, and the bikers who saved her, spread across town. Local reporters showed up, cameras capturing Hannah's tear-stained smile and the sight of leather-clad men carrying boxes into her modest home. Strangers reached out with donations, job offers, and handwritten letters of encouragement. Hannah, who had gone to bed the night before unsure how she'd keep the lights on, now stood in the center of a wave of unexpected kindness. For the first time in years, her heart dared to believe again that perhaps compassion could change not only her life, but the way her entire community saw the world. Hannah Walker's story began to grow far beyond her small town. Local news stations aired her interviews, and soon letters poured in from strangers who had seen her courage on television. Phone calls from nearby cities brought unexpected job offers. Cafes, restaurants, and even community centers wanted her on their team. For the first time in years, Hannah felt something she had almost forgotten: hope. Yet with that hope came the familiar shadow of uncertainty. Each night, when Jacob had drifted off to sleep, she would sit alone at the kitchen table, staring at bills still stacked in a neat but unforgiving pile. The kindness she had received was real, but could it last? Could she really rebuild a life from the ruins of a single lost job? The questions haunted her, even as gratitude swelled in her heart. The bikers, however, never disappeared into the distance. Hawk and his brothers returned often, checking in quietly, making sure she was safe, making sure Jacob had what he needed. Their presence became a shield against the doubt that crept in. Neighbors who once whispered judgment from behind curtains now nodded in respect when they passed her on the street. Parents from Jacob's school offered rides, meals, even friendship where there had once been cold silence. Hannah had never asked to be a symbol, but without realizing it, she became one. To the community, she represented something powerful, proof that treating people with dignity, even when the world demanded fear or contempt, could ripple outward and inspire change. Hannah Walker eventually found work at a small family-owned cafe just a few towns over. Unlike the diner where she had been dismissed, this cafe was built on warmth and community. The owners welcomed her not just as an employee, but as someone who represented values they deeply believed in: compassion, respect, and courage. Customers who had read about her story or seen her on the news traveled from near and far, eager to shake her hand, order a slice of pie, and tell her how her decision to treat strangers with dignity had inspired them. At home, Jacob's pride was unmistakable. He told his classmates about his mom, not the version who had lost her job, but the one who had stood tall when others turned away. Teachers noticed the change in him. He walked with a little more confidence, spoke with a little more courage, all because he had watched his mother face fear with grace. Hawk and the bikers visited the cafe from time to time, never to draw attention but simply to sit quietly in a corner booth, a silent reminder that true respect runs both ways. Hannah realized that the night she had walked home in tears, she thought she had lost everything. But in truth, she had only been pushed toward something greater. Losing her job had been painful, but without it, she might never have discovered the true power of kindness, the kind that changes not only your own life but the lives of everyone who sees it. One quiet evening, Hannah Walker tucked her son Jacob into bed. He clutched the notebooks and pencils the bikers had gifted him, his eyes heavy with sleep. She smoothed his hair and whispered the truth she had come to understand. Kindness is never wasted, Jacob. Sometimes it just takes time to come back to you. He nodded softly, a small smile forming as he drifted off. Outside, the distant rumble of motorcycles rolled through the neighborhood. But now, it carried no fear. It carried respect, gratitude, and the memory of the day one mother's choice to serve strangers with dignity had rewritten her family's story forever. Hannah's life had not changed because she lost a job. It changed because she chose to lead with kindness when it mattered most. And now, let me ask you, if you were in Hannah's shoes, would you have done the same? Would you have chosen kindness, even if it meant risking everything? If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Stories by BB, where we believe every act of kindness has the power to change lives.